All right, so I am doing this video on domestic violence and the power control wheel. And the reason why I am doing domestic violence and the power control wheel because I feel like it's usually underreported. So, going to school for social psychology, I ended up interning at a domestic violence shelter, and then I ended up going back to the shelter years later to work. What I found in between both experiences, working for the city and county, and also at other jobs, the state, the VA, I would keep on encountering stories of domestic violence. When I was working for the city, I ended up having two different women come to me, like that was a client that I was interviewing, and disclosing to me that they were in abusive relationships. After the second time, I actually went to the shelter where I previously worked and picked up business cards and stuff so that I can give it to the clients if they ever inquired about domestic violence again. Because of that, I am very passionate about it. I have other reasons too why I'm passionate about domestic violence and people being aware of what it really is and the cycle of abuse. And I always tell people that you could always look up the power control wheel. You could just Google it and it will tell you a lot of information about DV and DV situations and DV relationships if you ever have any questions. But I think I'll start with telling you the stories of the women that I encountered, and then I'll go over the actual DV information and how you can obtain it. So, I was working for the city, and I had a client that came in, and I was processing her benefits like any other time. She was sitting in front of me, and usually I'm just asking you general interview questions. Usually before that client sits in front of me, I've already prepped your case, I've already pulled your file, I've already got all the information, and I'm sitting there and I'm, just basically typing in your information and ask you general questions, the questions that I was not able to process or fill out on the documentation. So I'm doing this woman's paperwork, and she's sitting in front of me, and she's really quiet, and she's answering the questions. And then at one point, she asked me if she could get a piece of paper and a pen. And I look at her and I say, okay. And I pull out a piece of paper and a pen, and I hand it to her, and I assume that she wants the paper and the pen for whatever. I mean, maybe she's going to write something down about the questions I'm asking her, because we're in cubicles, not in offices. And if you've ever walked into a county building, it's a lot of us. So, So I give her the piece of paper and a pen, and I keep on typing up her information. And then she basically hands me the piece of paper, and she's very quiet. And it said, "On paper, please help me. I am in an abusive situation." Now, anytime I have a client, we would have days where sometimes we'd do interviews. So I would see back-to-back interviews, and I would see 6 clients a day within an hour. So I'd always go out to the lobby and call the client back. And she was in the lobby with someone, but the person who she was in the lobby with, I figured was probably her spouse, didn't really say anything, I stopped. I looked at the piece of paper. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my folders and my files, and we had interview rooms that were private. And I said, okay, let's go. And we got up and we walked to the interview room. We sat down. Me and her started speaking. I asked her what's going on. I said, I got your paper. How can I help you? She disclosed to me that she was in a battered situation, that her significant other was abusive and had abused her, and that she has not been able to get away from him, and she needed help and assistance. I gave her the card that we had in front of us, and I sat in front of her and I said, if you want to call, we can call now. And I said, this is a domestic violence hotline. And she said, what about your interview? And I was already almost halfway done with her interview. I said, well, you can sit in here and do your interview. I said, it'll be fine. And if it goes a little longer, don't worry about it. I'll let one of my other coworkers know, and they'll call my interview. And I said, but if you want me to sit in here with you, you can do that, or you can take the number with you. She did not feel comfortable leaving the office with the number because she was worried about her significant other basically saying something or finding the number on her later on. So I said, okay. So she called the hotline and she spoke to someone, and she said that she was afraid and if there was anything they could do, and they ended up coming up with a plan over the phone. She gave me some details of what was going on, and I think it's interesting because sometimes people who are victims of domestic violence situations, they can't trust anyone to tell that to. And sometimes it's easier to tell a stranger that you're working with in a social service office than to tell a family member, because by time you do get the courage to leave, no one believes you, or no one's there for you. And it all depends on how involved you were in it. Sometimes they're isolated. Sometimes their family is involved so many times. A lot of times I met women in shelters who did have family, but they were exhausted because the person would leave and then go back and leave and go back. And after a while, they don't just put themselves in danger, they put the other person in danger, the family members who are trying to support them. That was the first time that happened. And I just did what I was trained. It was interesting. I thought it was interesting that all the people in the office that she could have ended up sitting in front of, she happened to meet me at that moment, which, and I worked in that field. So, God willing, right? The next time there was a woman, and there was obviously something wrong with the situation. She was in the lobby, and when I went to call her out, she looked like she was almost gray. She looked really flush and exhausted. And when she was getting up, her husband was getting up with her, and she immediately said something to me that was like a cue. She said, "No, I can't, you can't go back with me. I'm only allowed to go back by myself." And she looked at me, and immediately I said, "Yes, it's probably better for her to come back, sir. It won't take too long, and she'll be back out." So as soon as we went and sat down, I asked her, "Is everything okay?" And then she disclosed immediately that she was in an abusive situation. She told me she had just had a baby, not even 24 hours ago. And her husband was so pissed off that she didn't apply for food stamps before she delivered the baby, that he was in the hospital room trying to hurt her while she was still in the hospital, and was taking her to the bathroom so that if the nurses or someone came in, they would not catch her or him hurting her. And she said that she was exhausted. She just looked very pale, and it made sense as soon as she told me that, because she left the hospital without even checking out, because he was adamant about her applying for food stamps. So in that situation, the same thing. We went into an isolated room, and I ended up disclosing to this woman and making this phone call. I think it's crucial for anyone who's listening to this video. If you ever feel like you're in a situation and you're in danger, I say disclose. Disclose to a city official, disclose to a police officer, disclose. Sometimes people are afraid to disclose, but usually you can find someone who's willing to help you, even if they know nothing about it. And that woman was able to get out of her situation too, from my understanding. But I didn't think it was going to take this long to explain those two situations, so I will leave this here, and I'll just do another one on the power and control wheel. Thanks for listening.